Okay, ready to resume. Would he be troublesome? Would he be mean? Should I go and live in the gorge until he moved on? How I wanted to hear his voice, to tell him about the Baron and Jesse C. James, to say words out loud. I really did not want to hide from him. Besides, he might be hungry, I thought. Finally, I spoke. "Hi," I said. I was delighted to see him roll over, open his eyes, and look up. He seemed startled, so I reassured him. "It's all right. They've gone. If you don't tell on me, I won't tell on you." When he heard this, he sat up and seemed to relax. "Oh," he said. Then he leaned against the tree and added, "Thanks." He evidently was thinking this over, for he propped his head on his elbow and studied me closely. "You're a sight for sore eyes," he said, and smiled. He had a nice smile, in fact. He looked nice and not like an outlaw at all. His eyes were very blue, and although tired, they did not look scared or hunted. And there's a picture. There's Mr. Outlaw. And there's Sam and Frightful. Can you see? However, I talked quickly before he could get up and run away. "I don't know anything about you, and I don't want to. You don't know anything about me, and don't want to. But you may stay here if you like. No one is going to find you here. Would you like some supper?" It was still early, but he looked hungry. "Do you have some?" "Yes. Venison or rabbit?" "Well, venison." His eyebrows puckered in question marks. I went to work. He arose, turned around and around, and looked at his surroundings. He whistled softly when I kindled a spark with the flint and steel. I was now quite quick at this, and I had a tidy fire blazing in a very few minutes. I was so used to myself doing this that it had not occurred to me that it would be interesting to a stranger. "Desdemondia," he said. I judged this to be some underworld phrase. At this moment, Frightful, who had been sitting quietly on her stump, began to preen. The outlaw jumped back, then saw that she was tied, and said, "And who is this ferocious-looking character?" "That is Frightful. Don't be afraid. She's quite wonderful and gentle. She would be glad to catch you a rabbit for supper if you would prefer that to venison." "Am I dreaming?" said the man. "I go to sleep by a campfire that looks like it was built by a Boy Scout, and I awaken in the middle of the 18th century?" I crawled into the store tree to get the smoked venison and some cattail tubers. When I came out again, he was speechless. "My storehouse," I explained. "I see," he answered. From that moment on, he did not talk much. He just watched me. I was so busy cooking the best meal that I possibly could get together that I didn't say much either. Later, I wrote down the menu, as it was excellent. Brown puffballs in deer fat with a little wild garlic. Filled pot with water. Put venison in. Boil. Wrap tubers in leaves and sticks in coals. Cut up apples and boil in can with dogtooth violet bulbs. Raspberries to finish meal. And there's a picture of a dogtooth violet with a picture of the little bulb, the little tuber. When the meal was ready, I served it to the man in my nicest turtle shell. I had to whittle him a fork out of the crotch of a twig, as Jesse Coon James had gone off with the others. He ate and ate and ate. And when he was done, he said, "May I call you Thoreau?" "That will do nicely," I said. Then I paused just to let him know that I knew a little about him too. I smiled and said, "I will call you Bando." His eyebrows went up. He cocked his head, shrugged his shoulders, and said, "That's close enough." With this, he sat and thought. I felt I had offended him, so I spoke. I will be glad to help. I will teach you how to live off the land. It is very easy. No one need find you. His eyebrows gathered together again. This was characteristic of Bando when he was concerned, and so I was sorry I had mentioned his past. After all, outlaw or no outlaw, he was an adult, and I still felt unsure of myself around adults. I changed the subject. Let's get some sleep, I said. Where do you sleep? He asked. All this time sitting and talking with me, he had not seen the entrance to my tree. I was pleased. Then I beckoned, walked a few feet to the left, and pushed back the deer-hide door and showed Bando my secret. Thoreau, he said, you are quite wonderful. He went in. I lit the turtle candle for him. He explored, tried the bed, came out and shook his head until I thought it would roll off. We didn't say much more that night. I let him sleep on my bed. His feet hung off, but he was comfortable, he said. I stretched out by the fire. The ground was dry, the night warm, and I could sleep on anything now. I got up early and had breakfast ready when Bando came stumbling out of the tree. We ate crawfish, and he really honestly seemed to like them. It takes a little more time to acquire a taste for wild foods, so Bando surprised me the way he liked the menu. Of course, he was hungry, and that helped. That day we didn't talk much, just went over the mountain collecting foods. I wanted to dig up the tubers of the Solomon's seal from a big garden of them on the other side of the gorge. We fished, we swam a little, and I told him I hoped I could make a raft pretty soon so I could float into deeper water and perhaps catch bigger fish. When Bando heard this, he took my axe and immediately began to cut young trees for this purpose. I watched him and said, "You must have lived on a farm or something." At that moment, a bird sang. "The wood pewee," said Bando, stopping his work. He stepped into the woods seeking it. Now I was astonished. "How would you know about a wood pewee in your business?" I grew bold enough to ask. "And just what do you think my business is?" he said as I followed him. "Well, you're not a minister." "Right." "And you're not a doctor or a lawyer." "Correct." "And you're not a businessman or a sailor." "No, I am not." "Nor do you dig ditches." "I do not." "Well, guess." Suddenly, I wanted to know for sure, so I said it. "You're a murderer or a thief or a racketeer, and you're hiding out." Bando stopped looking for the pewee. He turned and stared at me. At first I was frightened. A bandit might do anything. But he wasn't mad. He was laughing. He had a good deep laugh, and it kept coming out of him. I smiled, then grinned and laughed with him. "What's funny, Bando?" I asked. "I like that," he finally said. "I like that a lot." The tickle deep inside him kept chuckling. I had no more to say, so I ground my heel in the dirt while I waited him to get over the fun and explain it all to me. "Thoreau, my friend, I am just a college English teacher lost in the Catskills. I came out to hike around the woods, got completely lost yesterday, found your fire, and fell asleep beside it. I was hoping the scoutmaster and his troop would be back for supper and help me home." "Oh, no," my comment. Then I laughed. "You see, Bando, before I found you, I heard squad cars screaming up from the road. Occasionally you read about bandits that hide out in the forest, and I was just so sure that you were someone they were looking for." We gave up the pewee and went back to the raft making, talking very fast now and laughing a lot. He was fun. Then something sad occurred to me. "Well, if you're not a bandit, you'll have to go home very soon, and there's no point in teaching you how to live on fish and bark and plants." "I can stay a little while," he said. "This is a summer vacation." I must admit, I had not planned to eat crawfish on my vacation, but I'm rather getting to like it. "Maybe I can stay until your school opens," he went on. "That's after Labor Day, isn't it?" I was very still, thinking of how to answer that. Bando sensed this. Then he turned to me with a big grin. "You really mean you're going to try to winter it out here?" "I think I can." Well, he sat down, rubbed his forehead in his hands, and looked at me. Thoreau, I have led a varied life. Dishwasher, saxophone player, teacher. To me it has all been an interesting life, but just now it seems very dull. He sat a while with his head down, then looked up at the mountain and the rocks and the trees. I heard him sigh. Let's go fish. We can finish this another day. That is how I came to know Bando. We became very good friends in the week or 10 days that he stayed with me, and he helped me a lot. We spent several days gathering white oak acorns and ground nuts, harvesting the blueberry crop, and smoking fish. We flew Frightful every day just for the pleasure of lying on our backs in the meadow and watching her mastery of the sky. I had lots of meat, so what she caught those days was all hers. It was a pleasant time, warm, with occasional thunder showers, some of which we stayed out in. We talked about books. He did know a lot of books and could quote exciting things from them. One day, Bando went to town and came back with 5 pounds of sugar. I want to make blueberry jam, he announced. All those excellent berries and no jam. He worked 2 days at this. He knew how to make jam. He'd watched his pa make it in Mississippi, but we got stuck on what to put it in. I wrote this one night. August 29th. The raft is almost done. Bando has promised to stay until we can sail out into the deep fishing holes. Bando and I found some clay along the stream bank. It was slick as ice. Bando thought it would make good pottery. He shaped some jars and lids. They look good. Not Wedgwood, he said, but containers. We dried them on the rock in the meadow, and later Bando made a clay oven and baked them in it. He thinks they might hold blueberry jam that he has been making. Bando got the fire hot by blowing on it with some bellows, homemade bellows that he fashioned from one of my skins, tied together like a balloon. A reed is the nozzle. August 30th. It was a terribly hot day for Bando to be firing clay jars, but he stuck with it. They look jam-worthy, as he says, and he filled 3 of them tonight. The jam is good. The pots remind me of crude flower pots without the holes in the bottom. Some of the lids don't fit. Bando says he'll go home and read more about pottery making so he can do a better job next time. We like the jam. We eat it on hard acorn pancakes. Later, Bando met the Red Baron Weasel today for the first time. I don't know where the Baron has been this past week, but suddenly he appeared on the rock, and he nearly jumped down Bando's shirt collar. Bando said he liked the Baron best when he was in his hole. September 3rd. Bando taught me how to make willow whistles today. He and I went to the stream and cut 2 fat twigs about 8 inches long. He slipped the bark off of them. That means he pulled the wood out of the bark, leaving a tube. He made a mouthpiece on one end, cut a hole beneath it, and used the wood to slide up and down like a trombone. We played music until the moon came up. Bando could even play jazz on the willow whistles. They are wonderful instruments, sounding much like the wind in the tops of the hemlocks. Sad tunes are best suited to willow whistles. When we played The Young Voyagers, tears came to our eyes. It was so sad. And here are instructions on how to make a willow whistle. So you slide the wood out of the bark, and then you cut a little mouthpiece and you put a reed in there, and then you can slide the wood in and out like a trombone and change the pitch. Very cool. There were no more notes for many days. Bando had left me saying, "Goodbye, I'll see you at Christmas." I was so lonely that I kept sewing on my moccasins to keep myself busy. I sewed every free minute for 4 days, and when they were finished, I began a glove to protect my hand from Frightful's sharp talons. One day, when I was thinking very hard about being alone, Frightful gave her gentle call of love and contentment. I looked up. "Bird," I said, "I had almost forgotten how we used to talk." She made tiny movements with her beak and fluffed her feathers. This was a language I had forgotten since Bando came. It meant she was glad to see me and hear me, and that she was well fed and happy. I picked her up, squeaked into her neck feathers. She moved her beak, turning her bright head, and bit my nose very gently. Jesse Coon James came down from the trees for the first time in 10 days. He finished my fish dinner. Then, just before dusk, the Baron came up on his boulder and scratched and cleaned and played with a fern leaf. I had the feeling that we were all back together again. That's the end of the chapter. The next one is called In Which the Autumn Provides Food and Loneliness. It would be lonely being in the woods all by yourself for months and months, but he's going for it. All right, kiddos. Have any questions? Feel free to ask or comment or send me a polo or something. And I'll see you next time. Love you. Good night.